Hi, it's Katrina. From legendary cat burglars to the real Pink Panthers, here are 9 of the most famous jewelry thieves ever. Number 9. Thomas Blood. Thomas Blood was an Irishman famous for his shady past and his scheming nature. He is most famous for his attempt to steal the crown jewels of England. No easy feat, but if he could pull it off, not only would he be rich beyond his imagination, but he would show the royal family who was boss, and he would be famous. The main challenge is that the crown jewels were in the Tower of London. But what thief doesn't live for the challenge? In 1671, the Tower of London was probably one of the most fortified places in the world. The jewels were surrounded by guards, and no one but royalty could get anywhere near them. A big problem for most of us, but Thomas was very creative. He pretended to be royalty and created a fake life for himself. He became an aristocrat, got a fake wife, who was really a hired prostitute, and then made his way around England and the Tower of London during tours to make it clear that he was real. He had costumes, a royal daily routine, and of course fake friends who would help him pull off the heist. He and his new wife became friends with the keeper of the jewels, Talbot Edwards. They got so close that Thomas promised his fake nephew would marry Edwards' plain Jane daughter. So when the time came and they asked to take a peek at the crown jewels, how could Edwards say no? Edwards took the small royal group to see the jewels when no one was around, and then Thomas and his gang promptly knocked Edwards out and tried to steal all the jewels. He and his cohorts began smashing everything, trying to actually break and flatten it so that they could take it in portable pieces so they could sneak them out down their pants. So Edwards finally regained consciousness and started screaming. And remember, they wore tight pantaloons back then, so needless to say, this plan didn't work. So how is this a successful plan, you ask? When Thomas was locked up, he refused to speak to anyone except the king. King Charles II was so amused by what he had done that instead of committing him to death, he gave him his own title and estate in Ireland. Number 8. Bill Mason. You may not know the name Bill Mason from the history books, but rest assured he was a very successful thief. Not to be confused with Bill Mason, the Canadian naturalist and conservationist. He is considered by some law enforcement officials to be one of the most successful jewel thieves in American history, which is ironic because most of the people in his life didn't even know that he was a thief. On the surface, Bill Mason was just a regular guy living in America. He had a wife, a house, kids, a full-time job, living the American dream. But it wasn't enough for him. On the weekends, he would read magazines and attend society galas and pay attention to who was rich, a socialite, and who had the best jewels. And then he would sneak into their houses and rob them. He even robbed a mafia boss's safe, twice, and a gold medal from an Olympian. He felt bad though and ended up mailing it back. At parties, people would brag about their jewels and their alarms, their security guards, and the fact that they might be on the 18th floor, which was no problem for Mason. After 25 years, he was finally caught in the act and served 3 years in jail. The man knew how to keep a low profile. However, 3 years isn't much given the total amount of jewels he stole totaled around $70 million. If you want to learn more, he wrote a book called Confessions of a Master Jewel Thief. The main lesson is, never assume that your upper floor penthouse is impenetrable, and it's very easy for people to find your address. Number 7. Alan Golder. Despite what his name may indicate, Alan Golder was more of a diamond guy, and he was a talented diamond thief at that. So much so that when he started his career in his early 20s, he had been so successful that he got the nickname the Dinner Time Bandit. He was big in the 70s when security systems weren't what they are now, and so Golder would climb walls, trellises, or anything else he could find outside the house to allow him to get in through the windows on the upper levels. It worked quite well. He would sneak in like a cat around dinner time when everyone was downstairs. Like Mason, he also went after the rich and famous and stole millions of dollars worth of jewelry. Golder was also selective in picking his targets. However, in 1980, things went tragically wrong when he and an accomplice were spotted, and the accomplice shot the person. Golder spent 15 years in jail, but once he was released, he went back to what he did best. When he started feeling the heat, he went to Europe and began robbing homes in Spain, France, the Czech Republic, all over. He was the perfect aristocratic jewelry thief and is considered by many to have been the best in the world. until he was caught once again, extradited to the United States, and then sent back to jail on 40 counts of burglary in Connecticut. Number 6. Ignacio Pena Del Rio. Spanish national Ignacio Pena Del Rio came to the U.S. to try to become a professional mixed martial artist. He got a business degree from the University of San Diego, but it just wasn't enough. As time went on, he found an easier way to make money, and it wasn't with his college degree. He went on a burglary spree that made him rather infamous in the area. He committed over 1,000 robberies in the San Fernando Valley. That's a lot of robberies, and he was able to do this with his tools and skills. He had a wide arsenal to get into people's houses and would even use blowtorches to melt down locks. But more than that, he was a great climber, and he could ascend or descend just about any house with ease. A great cat burglar. Del Rio targeted older people who were suspicious of banks and would amass wealth and keep it in the house. He had several exit strategies and tried to blend into the community. He stole a $400,000 diamond and a $10 million Degas painting. Now he is collaborating with police and was able to get some time shaved off his prison sentence. Number 5. Doris Payne. 87-year-old Doris Payne has been arrested again. Known as the Granny Gem Thief, she is well known in jewelry circles and has been at it for a while. Last year, she confessed that she was going to stop stealing jewels and diamonds. That being said, her career is legendary. Unlike other thieves who would steal things when people aren't looking, Doris Payne would happily steal things right in front of your nose. But not through violence, that wasn't her style. Rather, she would go and use disguises and sleight of hand in order to get the jewels or diamonds she wanted. Payne would go into jewelry stores and other high-value targets dressed as a person of class and wealth, which naturally would get the attention of the people inside the place, as they felt this would be a person to make a large purchase. So she would ask for diamonds and then try them on and pretend to be very interested. Then, once the attendant was distracted or confused, going back and forth, Payne would make certain jewels disappear. It may sound simple, but she got away with it a lot. In total, her career netted her around $2 million worth of stolen goods, but who can say for sure? Including a $500,000 ring during a stint in Monte Carlo. She has been caught several times throughout her career in the US as well as in Europe, but has gotten away with things more often than not. While she doesn't steal jewels anymore, she is known for shoplifting. She has said, "I do not have any regrets about stealing jewelry. I regret getting caught." Number 4. Hajime Karasuyama. Not much is really known about Hajime Karasuyama. In fact, that's not even his real name. It's a pseudonym. So how do we know he exists? Simple. The Japanese burglar wrote a book about himself and gives tips on how to rob jewels. According to the book, Karasuyama is a gentleman thief who uses classic thieving techniques like picking locks, using glass cutters, and more in order to get into the houses he chooses to rob. He boasted about his skills quite a bit. What's more, he bragged about how he had a sense for where the jewelry was in any given house. The publisher was criticized for publishing this how-to book, but they say it is a good way for homeowners to know how to better protect their home. Karasuyama says he makes about $450,000 a year from his burglaries. As far as I know, he hasn't been caught yet. Number 3. Peter Scott. When he was 12 years old, Peter Gulston from Ireland dedicated his life to crime. He committed 150 robberies before being caught and sent to prison. Once he was released, he knew he couldn't stay in Belfast under his current name, so he moved to London and became Peter Scott, burglar extraordinaire. He targeted aristocrats, royalty, and of course, the rich and famous. He was an expert at robbing wealthy people of their fine arts and jewelry, including apparently robbing Sophia Loren of a 200,000-pound necklace. He also claimed to have robbed Zaza Gabor, Vivian Leigh, Elizabeth Taylor, as well as the Shah of Iran and even Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. On several occasions, the people of the house would hear him, but he would just shout, "It's only me," or "Everything's all right, madam," and they would think he was the butler. We're talking huge estates here. While he lived to be 82, his wealth did not last. He was a gambler and loved to spend his money on fast women and flashy cars. His words, not mine. He finally went bankrupt and died at the age of 82. Number 2. Borko Alic. One of the leaders of the infamous jewel theft gang, the Pink Panthers, Borko Alic is credited with stealing over 250 million pounds worth of jewels during his career. He and his group of thieves would rob in groups of 4 to 5 men, which would allow them to grab what they wanted and get out quickly. Their strategies were numerous and creative, and each one was more elaborate than the last. Most of the members of the Pink Panthers were believed to be ex-military personnel from the Balkans and may have been operating for over 30 years. They robbed the Carlton Hotel in Cannes several times. Once they took 39 million pounds worth of gems, and more recently in 2013, they stole 88 million worth of pounds of Chopard jewelry, which had been worn at the film festival. The whole thing was done in 30 seconds. Until Boris, none of the members had ever been caught. The 33-year-old Serbian was wanted in dozens of other countries, and he was finally caught by Interpol in Spain. In Dubai, the group had robbed $14 million worth of jewels at the Wafi Mall in 2007. Boris was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but mysteriously ended his life during the trial. Number 1. The Hope Diamond Robbery. In terms of diamonds, the Hope Diamond is one of the most famous and infamous jewels ever. It was most recently insured for $250 million and is said to be cursed. It has been stolen more often than anyone can even count, but I'll mention a couple of times. The legend goes that a Frenchman stole the 115-carat blue diamond from a Hindu temple, and so the priests put a curse on the gem and whoever possessed it. The Frenchman cut it down and sold it to King Louis XIV in 1668. Then the diamond was called the French Blue and was one of the most valued treasures in the French treasury. However, during the French Revolution in 1791, it was stolen, along with numerous other treasures. French citizens realized how easy the treasury was to rob, so over 30 people went and threw an all-night rager as they cleaned out the place. So really, these thieves were successful kind of by accident. While most of the gems were recovered, the French blue was not, and it didn't appear until decades later. Somehow it gotten into the hands of an Englishman named Henry Philip Hope, hence the name the Hope Diamond. It is now in the National Museum of Natural History in Washington behind 3-inch thick bulletproof glass. Thanks for watching! Did you enjoy these tales of thieves? Which was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!